All right, so kind of the other part of this Vedic age of why they actually call the Vedic age is because of these things called the Vedas. This is the religion that this Indo-European group brought with them. The Vedas are they're books, but at the time they were composed, they were orally composed, so they were memorized. They were split into four sort of large sections. And then different groups of priests, of these Brahmins, would memorize different sections of them. And the main one here is the Rig Veda. This is, if you've ever heard anything about the Vedas, it's probably the Rig Veda that has like 10 books. And again, they're books now, but back in 1500 BC or 2000 BC, they were memorized, orally transmitted. And the Rig Veda are the hymns. There's about 1,000 hymns divided into 10 books. They're religious hymns, and they're meant to be chanted. And a lot of them are, as we'll see, we'll give some examples of them. Or you'd perform these sacrifices and you'd say these hymns. And the ideas were, if you spoke them, the gods would be happy, right? You get what you would want out of them. Yajurveda, these again another sort of branch of this, were how to perform the ceremonies, manuals how to perform, so how to set them up. So there'd be certain Brahmins whose role was to like set everything up, set up the altar, get all the stuff they needed for these ones. Some Veda were like other songs about specific gods, like a little bit more like mythology, who these gods are and what they did. Theravada are these like sort of more magical formulas you could do for, I think there's a couple for like, would do for like hair loss or snake biting or various things, early medicine there. And then just to kind of give you an idea that Vedas is from this root vid, to know, and that same root vid is where we get the English word wisdom. So there's connections, the vid stuff there. So you can kind of, even in this Sanskrit world, you can see this Indo-European language there. And vid also various roundabout way also brings the word, I think, to know as well. But so that's what the Vedas are here. And again, they're orally transmitted, which I think makes a lot more sense. I mean, if you think about Hawaiian culture, right? I mean, that for generations, eons, stories were orally composed, transmitted from person to person through hula, through song, similar elements to the Vedas, right? That you had to memorize them exactly. So here's an example of somebody teaching their groups, these kids, how to memorize the Vedas. Here you sort of see a book that's laying out, but a lot of them would be orally. But you see these kind of holding stuff. I put a video up there. There's all these mnemonic devices they use to memorize the terms, the Vedic terms exactly. Because in the concept of the Vedas, the power of the Vedas was the sound. They believed that the Veda, the Sanskrit was the language of Sanskrit literally means put together well. So it's the language of the gods. So the gods gave the Indo-Aryans the language of Sanskrit. So they needed that sound to resonate. And there's this cosmic order, this rita, that these hymns and these sounds bring together. If you do them right, then everything works. And Om, which maybe some people have heard. This, you get this a lot in yoga. This is the sound, the origin of the universe. This Om, this sort of reverberation is sort of the fundamental sound of everything. This background hum of existence. And who memorize these things? Right, these Brahmins. So here's another good example. They perform the sacrifices here, and the Vedic sacrifices still go on today. People still memorize them, as we saw in that picture. Kids are still learning them. They go to Vedic schools. The part of the social stratification we talked about, the Brahmins, this was their job in society. They had to memorize what these were. Right, they performed the sacrifices. So they'd be chanting these hymns, throwing things into the fire, and the idea was that then this smoke from the fire goes up and feeds the gods. The gods feed off this, so they hear the noise. They're fed from these rituals, and that's what brings good things. A lot of these chants and hymns were for praising of the gods on one level, but also a lot of them ask for things, for rains for cattle, success in battle, these kind of the things that you would ask any god for, to benefit you in certain ways. And then obviously, right, if something bad happens, the idea was that, well, you must have messed up somewhere, right? You didn't memorize it correctly, right? The sacrifice didn't go up to the gods, right? If there's a drought or if a disease comes through, it's the gods. Gods were angry, so you got to go back and satisfy them, right, through this worship. And the Brahmins, they preserve this knowledge. So the Vedas, as they were 2,000, 3,000 years ago, are still recited exactly as they are today. Here's just kind of an example of Vedic hymn. The readings has a few more, but just kind of give you a sense of what these were. Right. So this is a Vedic hymn to Agni, the god of fire, the fire god. So they're praying to this god, right? That the Lord of powers, masters of the sacrificial food, right? They offer their sacrifices to Agni, right? And priests with their inspirations and shining speech, right? This Vedic hymn we're reciting. The father sacrifices for the sons, friends for friends as well. There's some other gods. May these other gods sit upon the sacred grass and to invoke and rejoice our friendship, right? So humans and gods working together. And we offer the sacrifice that you alone, the oblation is offered. Let them be for the lords above, right? Have favor for us, that you are beloved. So they're kind of talking about they're praying with this fire. So the praises go back and forth. So they'd be singing this into the fire, then the smoke would come up and Agni would be happy, right? Take pleasure in the sacrifice and speech. So you can kind of see that as one. So these you're doing this and you're throwing things in the fire and doing all of that. So this is kind of the sense of this Vedic world, these hymns, how these went about. And in these Vedas, you can kind of see what Vedic world was about. There's ones about cattle, and so we know that was important. There's one that in the reading, the last one there, it's about gambling, which is a really interesting one. So gambling was very much part of this, which we'll see a little bit later on when we get into some epic literature as well. So you can kind of pull out what again, sort of infer what these worlds were, because one thing we don't have a lot of the Vedic world is archaeological evidence, because they were nomads. They were rolling around. So we have some burial plots with some chariots, but they didn't build in the beginning, right? They didn't, as Indo-Aryans were moving across and populating, settling into South Asia, they didn't leave a lot of material culture back, but we get insights in their culture through these hymns, Vedic hymns. And just some of the people here, Vedic gods. Indra was the king of the gods. He was associated with the rain and thunder. So you kind of see that again. If you look at Zeus in the context of Greece, or Jupiter, I think is who he is in the Roman world, right? The power, lightning is very symbolic of gods. So he's responsible for storms. So you want Indra to be happy, to bring rain, but not floods, right? He's always accompanied by Maruts. Here's his Marut. So there's a cloud. So you kind of see the natural world of phenomenon around. And then these gods are later personified. They talk about them in some other Vedas, what they look like. They're associated with different animals, elephants here, but also lightning. And then, so Indra brings his army, the clouds, with him wherever he goes. Agni, we talked about, the god of fire. He's the one who brings the fire up to the gods. So you can kind of see here's another sort of Vedic ceremony being practiced today. Soma, this is a really interesting one. So another point of part of this ritual is you would take this soma, this hallucinogenic beverage that these Brahmins would drink. We don't really know what it is. The recipe's been lost over time, but they think it was maybe some sort of mushroom toxin, though also up in Afghanistan is where a lot of poppy is from. Poppy is what they make opium from, so maybe it was an opiate as well. They don't really know, but the idea was that you would drink this stuff, and then this is part of this. So you'd be drinking this, you'd be sort of hallucinating, speaking these hymns, and some of these Vedic ceremonies, are days long. So you just be in this sort of trance state. So you can see how very religious and spiritual. And Soma was also a god, so you'd say, you'd give praise to Soma, to help facilitate the connections and communications with God. So Soma's the elixir of the gods, also associated with the moon. Soma's connections there. So Soma's it's a god, but it's also an actual beverage they drink. Vak is the goddess of speech. So she's the one that actually brought Sanskrit down. helped compose the Vedas. She's also associated with music, so you kind of see how these gods are connected there in the human world. Varuna is the sky god, associated with truth and justice, helps create the universe. Varuna is found in a lot of these other, often in Vedic hymns, praised. Surya is a sun god, always accompanied by Ushas, the goddess of dawn. So dawn comes first, bringing the sun on the chariot, which again, so the idea that the sun comes up and goes over the sky, it's drawn by chariots every year or every day, right? Day by day, the sun comes up. So that's just kind of some of these sort of Vedic pantheons that we know via the Vedas, and the Vedas are very much what we know about sort of how this society was structured. And we go back, I mean, one of those Vedas we talk about was this Purusha, Purusha, the man, the Veda that explains how society is built together. Right? And some of the other Vedas talk about creation myth. There's a lot of different. There's not a single creation myth in the Vedas. There's all sorts of ones, cosmic eggs and things like that. So there's a lot in the Vedas. It's a huge body of work, which kind of shows also the amount of thought put in this over, probably millennia. And the important part about them, they're still around today. People still study the Vedas, recite the Vedas, and it's still part of the contemporary religion of Hinduism.